A 12-year-old boy vanishes. His mother searches desperately for him.
I was a frantic mother. I didn't know what to do.
4 months later, a disturbing discovery leads police to this teenager.
Everybody that knows him just thinks the world of him.
He is not the choir boy that his attorney and his family paint him out to be. There's definitely two sides to Michael Saltz, and one was not very pretty.
This is Crime Stories. I'm Catherine Cryer. For a parent, what could be worse than a missing child? Whether you live in a big city or a small town, the fear is the same, that your child has been abducted by a stranger. But what if that danger was much closer to home? That's what happened to Joe Barefoot. On May 25, 1997, a hot Sunday night in Columbia, South Carolina, Joe Barefoot should have come home before the sun went down, but he didn't.
Sunday night, Jackie called me, "Have you seen Joe? Do you know where Joe might be?" And I said, "No, I haven't."
At first, his mother, Jackie Barefoot, thought her 12-year-old son was outside playing and just lost track of time.
About 6, 7 o'clock, I looked for him a little bit, but I wasn't worried. I didn't get worried until it got dark, because he knew to be home at dark.
When Joe still didn't come home, Jackie knew that something was very wrong.
And she said, "Well, Shasta, he's missing and I can't find him."
And then I just totally freaked out. I looked for him for about an hour before I called the police.
The police took a report and told Jackie to call the next day if she still hadn't heard from Joe.
And I think that they disregarded our panic. You know, and we see this all the time. Well, we don't. And we did not get the personal attention to begin with that Joe should have got.
The next day, there was still no sign of Joe. Jackie called the police again.
I called them Monday night. They came out. Called them Tuesday. They came out. Wednesday, I finally got an investigator.
That investigator was Dale Jones, Jr.
We started trying to talk to anybody in the area, started talking to other teenagers and young people. We had information from one of the other people that he had told them that he was running away.
But Joe was not the kind of kid to run away from anything.
He wasn't scared of much of nothing. He was cocky. He was a little smart butt. But he was a good kid.
Joseph was the second of 3 children, in between his brother Michael and his sister Samantha.
He had these eyes. And he had these eyes the day he come home from the hospital. These gorgeous, gorgeous eyes. And just his eyelashes were an inch and a half long. Any woman wanted to have them. When he learned to talk, he started getting this little smart mouth. Everybody else would think, and I'd just be laughing at him because he was nice that way. He was funny. He had character. He had personality that didn't belong to a 3-year-old.
As he got older, that personality sometimes got him into trouble.
A couple of times in school, he got in a couple of little ruckuses. There was one time he got caught moving the camera in the bathroom in the boys' room. Joseph loved to go to the racetrack, and they just had a blast. You know, they made money off of getting ice for people. You know, they just were boys, and they played football and ran around the place like they owned it. Fairground was his second favorite thing. Christmas and his birthday, you know, because he was always getting stuff for them.
Several months before Joe disappeared, Jackie and the kids moved in with her parents.
He had to be tough in that neighborhood. Short little thing. Joe was small for his age, so he had to be big. He put on a tough shell, and meant it, and it backed it up. And the people that he loved dearly, and the people who he felt like had nothing to do with him or disliked him, he disliked them.
Well, I mean, somebody'd say something to him and he'd be like, "Hey, screw you." I mean, he didn't take nothing from nobody.
After Joe disappeared, there were rumors he was living in the woods nearby and that his best friend Charlie Minjadot was helping him hide.
Was really believing at one point that Charlie might have been helping, as far as just that he knew maybe something wasn't right at home or something, was trying to help him hide out, because we had some stories that maybe he had gone and given him some food or something like that.
5 days after his disappearance, police began to search for Joseph Barefoot.
Thursday, I got the Mountie Patrol. I had them for about 3, maybe 4 hours. And then it got dark, so they had to go.
They covered over 33 acres, the posse did. All during this time, we still had manpower searches going on. Both uniformed officers and other people and that going out there, hitting different areas.
The police even used an FBI plane and brought in dogs to search the area. And still, they found nothing.
Our problem is we have nowhere exactly to look. So even though we may have covered an area one day, if he is alive, he may have been in a different area at that time and then come back to that area.
Days and then weeks went by, and still there was no sign of Joe Barefoot. Could a 12-year-old runaway stay hidden in the woods during a hot South Carolina summer, or had something more sinister happened to him? The only lead the police had came from Jackie's Uncle Grady. He said he saw Joe being abducted.
Nobody ever believed nothing Uncle Grady said because he drank a lot. Well, Uncle Grady said, when he was sitting on Jackie's front porch, that Joe was on his bicycle on the corner of the street on Hickory Ridge, that a guy pulled up in a white pickup truck, said something to Joe. 2 guys jumped out, grabbed Joe, threw Joe's bike in the back of the truck and took off.
Uncle Grady said the pickup truck was driven by a kid named Mikey. Jackie included that information on a flyer that she and Shasta handed out as they searched for Joe. Police traced the truck to a 17-year-old high school student named Michael Saltz Jr., who told them he'd given Joe and his friend Charlie a ride on the day before Joe disappeared, a fact that Charlie confirms.
So at that time, we really didn't think we had anything more than just that he had given him the ride.
The only lead seemed to be a dead end, and the investigation stalled.
I was frustrated with the police department because I didn't feel like they were doing enough. I was a frantic mother. I didn't know what to do. And, you know, nobody hands out a handbook. This is what happens if for some reason you lose your child.
So Jackie and Shasta continued to search on their own.
And then we'd heard another rumor that he was sleeping in the dugouts out here. So we came out here with flashlights and we checked all the dugouts. And then we came out to that group of trees over there. And we sat out there on a blanket where we couldn't be seen. And stayed out there for probably 5-6 hours. And we never did see anything other than a few adults that pulled up in the parking lot and left. You know, no kids, no nothing in the middle of the night out here.
They spent hours searching the woods near the golf course and the pond where Joe liked to hang out. They even tried to drag the pond themselves, looking for something, anything, to give them a clue to where Joe was. As Jackie continued to search, the weeks turned into months.
She would drop me off at about 7 in the evenings, and she'd search for Joe for a couple hours, and I'd work till about 3 or 4 in the morning. And then she'd pick me up. When the sun come up, we'd start walking through the woods. And I'd walk as long and as far as I could. And then I'd have to go get some rest. Then it'd be time for me to go back to work again, and Jackie would drop me off. You know, she got even less sleep than I did.
I was so tired, headaches, my feet hurt, tired of sitting in cars, definitely not eating good, blisters on my feet, mosquito bites, scratches, cuts. I was driving a car with no brakes, no tags, no insurance, no nothing, just my driver's license and good looks going down the road.
Then one day, Jackie thought she saw him.
I seen this little kid pedaling a bicycle down the road just as fast as he could. And he had on a t-shirt, black hair, cap. And I seen him from behind, and I thought it was him. And I chased him down and made him stop on the side of the road.
What were you feeling when you were chasing him down?
I thought that was him, and I was going to grab his little behind and give him a spanking and make him come home. But it wasn't him.
Joseph Barefoot had simply disappeared without a trace. For the 2 women who loved him, the search for a missing boy had become a mission to recover his body.
And we would look for crows or hawks flying in the air because, you know, if someone's dead somewhere, you know. And then I thought if we found Joe's body that it would kill her. But see, Jackie was counting on me. You know, I had helped her with everything all of her life. Ever since we met, I can make things good. I'm good at that. And I was trying not to let her down. So if it meant finding a body, I would have found a body.
My worst fear was that I would find nothing but bones when I did find him. And I did.
Almost 4 months after he disappeared, a surveyor working in the woods near the golf course came upon what was left of Joseph Barefoot. Near the base of a tree were his bones and hair. His wallet, socks, shoes, and hat were all found nearby. His underwear and pants were missing, never to be recovered. Police identified the remains using dental records. They were unable to determine the time or cause of death. At the scene, police also recovered Joe's bicycle and a black nylon cord tied around a tree. Had Joseph Barefoot been held captive in the woods?
I can't get it out of my mind that if we had acted those first 3 or 4 days, that Joe was tied to that tree alive. Maybe he could have been saved.
Joe Barefoot died within a mile of his home. What happened to Joe Barefoot in the woods? When we return, the discovery of Joseph Barefoot's remains sets in motion a chain of events that shocks a small town. "4 months after his disappearance, Joe Barefoot's remains are found in the woods near his home. Police have no leads and only 2 clues: Joe's bike, which was recovered without a seat, and a black nylon cord found wrapped around the tree at the crime scene. After Joe's disappearance, a flyer identified a teenager named Mike with a white pickup truck as the last person to see him alive. As the investigation continued, the police interviewed more than 100 people, and only one name repeatedly came up in the investigation: 17-year-old high school senior Mikey Saltz.
He came up more than once, and by more than, and not just the people in his own group. People from other groups had mentioned.
Remember, Mikey knew Joe from around the neighborhood and had told police that he had given him a ride the day before he disappeared.
But there wasn't anything that we could link to at that time other than just a missing child.
But that was about to change. On the day after Joe Barefoot's bones were found, came the disturbing revelation that there were people who believed they had known all along who killed him. Sydney Bunce says one night in early June of 1997, Mikey and a friend, Todd Ledford, came to see her.
We were just kind of casually talking. And Mikey, or I think it was Mikey that brought it up about this boy who was missing. Well, I was like, well, what boy? I never watched the news. I'm a teenager. I'm not supposed to care. And so he shows me this flyer. He said, yeah, can you believe that the police thought that I had something to do with it? He just kind of made the remark, I killed him.
Sydney didn't take him seriously.
You just don't think that anybody that you know would do anything like that.
4 months later, Sydney was watching TV.
WIS, the Spirit of Carolina.
When she learned that Joe Barefoot's remains had been discovered. Later that night, she got a call from Todd Ledford, the boy who'd been with Mikey when Mikey had joked about killing Joe.
I said, it's Mikey. And then he said, yes, it is. How did you know? And I said, I didn't know, but you just told on him.
The next day, Todd drove to school with his neighbor, Jennifer Capel, who was also Sydney's best friend.
He said, I know who killed Jojo. I said, who? He said, do you remember the guy that came to my house in the white Chevy S10? And I said, yeah. And he said, that was Mikey. He goes, Mikey did it. I was just like, whoa, what's going on? And I I didn't know what to believe at that time, but then Sydney came to my house and was talking to me about it, and I was like, wait a minute here. I was like, this is a little too familiar. And that's when I started believing it, really, truly believing it.
After her conversation with Jennifer, Sydney says she told Todd that he had until the next day to go to the police, and if he wouldn't, then she would. But after their conversation, Sydney changed her mind and told her parents what Todd said. Her parents called the police. The next day, police followed Mikey to Lower Richland High School, where investigators asked him to come to police headquarters and take a polygraph. Mikey failed the polygraph. He was then taken to the office of David Wilson, where the police say he consented to an interview. For the next 6.5 hours, Wilson interrogated Mikey Saltz without an attorney or his parents present. As the hours went by, Mikey Saltz gave police 6 different versions of what happened to Joe Barefoot, each time moving himself closer to the crime. In his final statement, Saltz told police that 2 or 3 weeks after Joe Barefoot disappeared, he was walking in the woods around noon when he saw Joe. He said Joe was bad-mouthing him, and he got mad. He said he kept walking, but Joe kept mouthing off. Angry, Mikey turned and pushed Joe to the ground, knocking him unconscious. While Joe was on the ground, he hit him in the back. Then he picked him up, tied his hands behind his back, and tied him to a tree. In the statement, he also tells police 2 pieces of information they say only the killer could have known. Joe's bicycle had no seat, and that he found a black nylon cord in the woods. These details were critical because the bike was removed in a body bag, and details about its condition and the color of the cord were never made public. But there were other things that Mikey wasn't telling the police.
I didn't ask him the question of what happened to Barefoot's pants. Obviously, that's going to be a central point, something we need to know. It's at that point that he sits bolt, just upright. Obviously, that question had a real effect on him. Obviously, with the missing pants, the entire body's there, the clothing is there, with the exception of the pants. I think one sock. Obviously, we're thinking sexual assault. Do we have any basis in fact other than the fact that the pants are missing? No. But that's obviously what we're thinking.
2 days after the discovery of Joseph Barefoot's remains, Michael Saltz Jr. was arrested and charged with the murder. He was 3 months shy of his 18th birthday. Who was Mikey Saltz? And could he have done this?
I really didn't think that that little boy in the white truck who knew my children had anything to do with Joe disappearing. I didn't. I mean, I was looking for a culprit. I was looking for a bad, big, ugly person. And it was right there, a schoolboy in the neighborhood, where I felt like an idiot.
No one was more surprised than his parents, Mike and Kathy Saltz, who had learned from one of Mikey's friends that he was taken to police headquarters. The Saltzes went to the police station, where they say they waited for hours but were not allowed to see their son. The next day, they hired John Mobley to defend him. Although Mikey Saltz was an adult under South Carolina law at the time of his confession, Mobley says the police browbeat a naive, frightened teenager into confessing.
And I think people think, oh, I wouldn't confess something I didn't do. Well, yeah, but you're not a teenager, and you're not in a situation where they had you for 7 hours by yourself, and you were denied access to your parents, and as much as you tell them that you don't know anything, you had nothing to do with it, they're not going to believe you, and they're not going to let you go. But they knew that the only way to get an admission against this kid was to isolate him, and that's what they did.
So why did Mikey Saltz sign the statement? His father says the police offered Mikey a reduced sentence if he confessed. Wilson says that's not true.
No, there's never any deals, there's never any promises, there's never any inclinations of deals or whatever that's been alleged here.
Mike and Kathy Saltz have been married for 21 years. Mike is a 20-year veteran of the Army who served all over the world.
Mikey was born at Fort Hood, Texas on December the 8th, 79. He weighed 7 pounds 7 ounces, and he was 21 inches long.
When Mike was assigned to Fort Jackson as a drill instructor, he and Kathy moved to South Carolina with their 3 children, Mikey, Jamie, and Laurie.
They're like the Leave It to Beaver kind of parents. Are really great. I can tell their mom and their dad are really into their lives. They cut up with you. They get along well with Mikey and Jamie's friends. I mean, they're really sweet.
The Saltzes are known in the neighborhood as a close family, especially Mike and Mikey.
We was always together. Me and my son was, Mike was my reason for living most times. I mean, I loved coming home and seeing my son. I loved coming home and seeing my wife, my daughters, but I guess it was wrong sometimes, but my focus mostly was coming home and seeing my son. We always had a project in the works, and it gave me something to do. Mike's almost like the typical teenager. He's the same things interest him. He's more focused on cars. He really enjoys working on cars, and him and I do a lot of that together. To him, a good day's come home from work and me and him work on some car, something he needs to be done, stereo system, and that's kind of the focus of his whole life, is just his maintenance, working on cars. He likes cars a lot. Or this is one we restored. This is a 64.5 Mustang. Me and Mike spent 2 years on this one. It took us about 2 years because he wanted it just right because his mom was going to drive it.
Mikey was a quiet kid who helped out around the neighborhood.
Mike's a good, hard-working kid, and the neighbors used him all the time, whether it was, spreading 2 tons of sand or putting in fences, painting houses, and everybody around here seemed to always have him doing something. They always need him for something.
At Lower Richland High School, Mikey was in the ROTC program and was planning on following his father into a career in the military. After his arrest, Mikey's friends at the high school showed their support for him.
We all had our ID badges that we had to wear at school, and they all said Mikey's innocent on them with his picture. You'd have to know Mikey on a personal level to know that he could never, much less think about doing something like that, than actually doing it. There's not a bit of that kind of person in Mikey.
And so strong was the support for Mikey Saltz in the community that students, friends, and neighbors packed his bond hearing to demonstrate that the Mikey Saltz they knew could never have committed such a heinous crime.
If you had thought your son had done it, what would you have done?
I would have stayed with him, and I would have supported him, and we would have went through the whole system, and I would have told him, son, you got to pay for what you've done. I would honestly told him that.
But you never had that conversation?
Never have, but we had that conversation. Mikey, I've always known Mike's innocence from the time that they told me that. From the night they told me, I knew he was innocent.
But somebody killed Joe Barefoot, and for his mother who endured the unimaginable, the pain was about to get worse. On the day she buried her son, Jackie Barefoot learned that the teenager charged with killing him was free on bond.
We were at the graveside, and they told me that he had just got out. I mean, this boy didn't come in my house and steal my radio. He didn't steal my car. He didn't flatten all my tires. He killed my child.
When we return, the case against Mikey Saltz. "18 months after the discovery of Joe Barefoot's remains, Mikey Saltz goes on trial for his murder. On the night before the trial begins, Mikey Saltz makes his only public statement.
First, I'd like to thank my family and friends who believed in me and stood by me through this. For those who know me, know I couldn't have committed such a crime. For the sake of Miss Barefoot, I hope those who did commit this crime will be brought to justice. For those who told so many lies against me, you guys know the real truth.
In his statement, Mikey lays out what will become the defense's strategy.
For 7 hours, investigators denied me the right to see my parents, made threats about my mother, and emotionally abused me. Despite my emotional state throughout the interview and my repeated request to see my parents, it was made clear to me that my innocence was not accepted.
Be seated.
As the trial starts, Mike Saltz Sr. takes the unusual step of sitting next to his son at the defense table.
I need to be there with him because you always feel like you got to protect him. My son couldn't protect himself, so I had to be there with him all the time. And he always knew I would, and he always knew I will. You know, I'll never stop. I'm always there for him.
This case is about a 12-year-old boy dying in the woods alone.
Remember, when the body was found, all that was left of Joe Barefoot was bones, teeth, and hair.
I challenge him to prove to you conclusively any proof, any conclusive evidence that Michael Saltz beat that kid to death. That anybody beat him to death. They won't be able to prove the kid was murdered, let alone beat to death. They can't prove the kid didn't die of dehydration. They couldn't prove he didn't die of starvation, heat exhaustion, snake bite, strangulation, anything. They can give you a bunch of theories of what's possible. They will not be able to prove conclusively what happened to that kid. And they can't prove to any certainty when it happened.
The prosecution faces a daunting task. They have no witnesses to the crime, and they have no motive as to why Mikey would have killed Joe.
We did not have to prove a motive, nor do we have to prove how he died. Our responsibility was to prove that Michael Saltz's actions were the proximate cause of his death. And so under our theory was that by beating him and tying him to the tree, Joseph would not have died but for Mr. Saltz's actions.
At this time, the state would call Selena Welch.
To make their case, the prosecution calls Selena Welch, an ex-girlfriend of Mikey Saltz's, who tells the court what Mikey told her in June of 1997.
Selena, do you remember ever that night or ever egging on or teasing Michael Saltz about Joseph Barefoot being missing?
No, sir.
Who started talking about it?
Michael.
And what statement did he make?
He's like, I killed Joseph. I was like, that's nothing to joke about. And he's like, no, really, I did. And then at the end, he's like, no, I'm just playing.
The prosecution also calls Sydney Bunce, the woman who called the police. But here, the testimony takes a strange turn.
Did the conversation again come back to Joseph Barefoot?
Yes, it did.
And who brought the conversation back to Joseph Barefoot?
Michael Saltz.
And what did he say to you?
I don't remember.
Beg your pardon?
I don't remember.
And Mr. Ledford was present when during this conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I do remember what he said. It was, he said I killed Joseph Barefoot. I was nervous. I had, just been through crying, just gotten through crying. And like I say, I have short-term memory loss. And that's my only explanation for that.
Selena and Sydney, who didn't know each other, gave the police virtually identical statements about what Mikey told them. But Mobley says Mikey wasn't confessing, he was just kidding.
It's odd that there are only two teenagers, out of the hundreds that are out there, that are coming forward to say, well, Mikey bragged about it. And everybody admits that they kidded him about it, and he had opportunities to, to brag that he did it or say he did it. But the only two people are people he's not even very close to.
And another huge obstacle for the prosecution, when police searched Mikey Saltz's house and truck, there was not one piece of evidence to link him to the crime.
And they looked, they stripped this truck apart. No hair, nothing.
After 5 or 6 months had passed, common sense would tell you that there's not going to be anything left. He had the opportunity to clean his truck. If there was anything in his truck, he'd had the chance to get anything out of his house, if there was anything that tied him to it.
With all their resources, with all their manpower, not one eyewitness, they don't have any physical evidence tying Michael Saltz to this crime. When I say that, I mean they don't have a murder weapon they can say caused this crime. They don't have any blood they can say they found at the scene. They traced Michael Saltz or anything they found on him. They don't have any hair, any evidence, any DNA evidence, nothing.
But what the prosecution does have is Mikey Saltz's written statement to the police, and they will use his words against him.
And I think whenever you have a case where a child dies, I mean, people want to convict somebody for something like that. So, I mean, the confession clearly is what hurt him in this case. I mean, there's no question about that. I mean, had it not been for the confession, they would have had no case. They would have never arrested him. They would have certainly never tried him. But that was enough in this case, unfortunately for him.
But according to the defense, the confession is not as strong as it seems.
If you look at the statement in itself, it's not what you really consider when you think of what a confession is going to be. There's no real explanation as to what he was doing there. I mean, there are too many things that don't make sense in it.
In his statement, Mikey told police that 2 weeks after Joe disappeared, he was walking down a path in the woods when he ran into him. The police had searched the area from the air, on foot, on horseback, and with dogs, and there was never any trace of Joe.
First of all, I mean, the fact that this kid is missing, nobody else can find him. He's just walking along one day and finds him. It just doesn't make any sense. And then, all of a sudden, this kid starts mouthing off at him for no reason. That doesn't make any sense. And then you have this kid who has no history of violence toward anyone deciding, in a fit of rage, to beat this kid and tie him to it, and this happens according to his statement in broad daylight.
Mikey Saltz gave police 6 versions of what happened in the woods, each time moving himself closer to the crime.
The first initial admission that he gave us was he admitted that he had bragged about killing Joseph Barefoot. And he then stated that he had overheard some boys at school talking about killing Barefoot, but they didn't know who they were. He said he went to the location and actually saw the body. It was at that point that he asked about the different degrees of murder, which really makes you think this kid is pretty much aware of what's going on. He's really thinking. And he stated in his 6th story that it was himself and 2 boys. He said it happened the way he had said previously. When he asked who else was involved, he wouldn't answer the question. He wouldn't say, I don't know, he just wouldn't answer.
Mobley says the police chose only the most incriminating statement to let Mikey sign.
I think it became clear to Mikey that after 7 hours, I mean, no matter what he said, I mean, if you look back at it, they say he was making up lies and telling different stories. Well, as much as they believed he was lying, as soon as he made a statement implicating himself and nobody else, that's when they said, okay, sign this one.
At that point of the interview, we realized that this was probably the best it was going to get. Did we think it was 100% of the truth? No. Partial truth? Yes.
For them to say that's as good as it was going to get, I think they've got to concede that they knew that without an admission, they had no case against this guy.
In the confession, Mikey told police that Joe's bike did not have a seat and that the nylon cord found at the scene was black, information that was never released to the public.
It was our position that those were 2 facts that only the killer could know.
But the defense says that Mikey only knew about the bike and the cord because the police showed him pictures of the crime scene during the interview, a charge the police deny.
Did we show pictures? No, that happened at the end of the written statement, after he's already talked about it, long after he's given the description of the bicycle.
Then, in a stunning reversal, the defense calls to the stand the witness they say can name the killer, Tina Ashford, Mikey Saltz's girlfriend at the time of the trial.
Do you know an individual by the name of Charlie Menjadot?
Yes, I do.
Charlie Menjadot was Joe Barefoot's best friend.
You recall an occasion with Charlie Menjadot making a statement regarding Joseph Barefoot?
Yes.
Please tell the jury what that statement was.
Charles told me they put a bag over his head and then they beat him. And then he tried to crawl away and try to say something, but he couldn't. And then they left and they came back several other times, and one time they came back and he was just dead.
I knew her and Mikey was dating, but I didn't think she was going to pull anything out of that.
The prosecution didn't believe it either, and questions why, if Charlie made the statement to her shortly after Joe's disappearance, she waited until right before the trial started to come forward.
Miss Ashford, you went to your boyfriend's lawyer's office and signed an affidavit 13 days before this jury was selected because you would do anything to make sure he does not get convicted.
No.
Isn't that true?
No.
We were being hard on Charlie to try and see if Charlie would give us anything. And Charlie broke down several times, kind of. If he knew something, he would have been able to, he would have gave it up. There's just no way that a boy at that age would have been able to hold that long and stuff now if he had anything to do with this.
After a 5-day trial, it took the jury only 45 minutes to reach a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty as charged. Signed, Joseph.
For Mikey Saltz's mother, the verdict is a stunning blow.
Oh, it was very familiar. I had done that thousands of times, that shrieking, crying, broken heart, torn all apart sound. It went right through me. And I felt sorry for her.
The main thing going through my mind at that minute was, you know, that
she was worried because the judge had said that if anybody loses control and any outbursts of crying or anything, they'd be dealt with. I'm not sure what the terminology was, but he had said that, and so when she started losing control, she got up and ran because she was scared.
I didn't want to break down in front of Mikey. Making out.
You're not. I don't know.
When we return, Mikey Saltz is sentenced. After a 5-day trial, it took the jury just 45 minutes to convict Mikey Saltz of the murder of Joe Barefoot. Because the case was so controversial, no jurors wanted to speak on camera. But one did say that it all came down to one thing, his confession.
The statement did it. We based our decision on his statement.
For Joe's mother, Jackie Barefoot, the conviction is an empty victory.
I was relieved that he would finally go to jail. But it still didn't make anything any better. And it still didn't bring Joe back. And this big weight that I thought would be lifted off my shoulders didn't go anywhere.
For those who loved Joe Barefoot, the questions remain. Did Mikey act alone? Is he protecting someone? And most of all, what happened to Joe?
I thought maybe that he might have walked on somebody that was doing something they weren't supposed to do, or maybe he's seen something and they thought he was going to tell. And I thought maybe something like that had happened to him, coming through the woods or something to come home.
I would have loved to know the whole story, and I would still love to know the whole story and to find whoever else is involved in this case. But it's one of those that it may be with me. This may be a career case that continues following with me until I retire, and it just never know.
But if somebody else done this, or if someone went back to the crime scene after they beat Joe and tied Joe, and this child knows anything, he's obligated. He should tell this. This could set him free. If it wasn't him, then he needs to tell who it is.
According to Mikey Saltz's attorney, whoever it is, it's not Mikey.
Well, even after he got convicted, he had the opportunity to finger somebody else or make something up to make himself look better or save himself some time, and he still didn't do it. And and I mean, I don't think he's that stupid. I don't think he would take the fall for something that somebody else did. If he's going to spend 42 years in prison day for day at 19 years old, I mean, if he knew something, he'd be telling it.
Shasta Menjadot thinks Mikey's silence may be hiding an even darker secret.
If he told the truth and it turns out that he's a sick puppy, then it may embarrass him more to his parents and to his family and to his friends. I think it's a popularity contest. I think he can either be popular for being a murderer or taking the rat for somebody, or he can be popular for being a pervert. And I think the truth for Michael Saltz may be worse than what we got going on right now.
And after delaying sentencing to investigate Mikey's past, Judge James Williams still has no theory as to why the murder happened.
He had a relatively normal upbringing. There was not anything that stood out as real significant in any manner at all.
1 week after being convicted of the murder of Joseph Barefoot, Mikey Saltz returns to court for his sentencing. But first, Joe Barefoot's mother addresses the court.
Good morning, Your Honor. This whole trial has not gave me any pleasure at all. It saddens me to do this to his family, and it saddens me even more that he did this to my child. I don't believe that he should ever be able to see the light of day again in his life. And I wish that he would speak up and tell the truth and let me know what happened to my son, instead of leaving me with all these unanswered questions.
All right.
Then Mike Saltz Sr. speaks on behalf of his son.
Sir, I just want to say, and I know the court's been here, that I watched the trial take place. I've seen a lot of problems. I know my son better than anybody, and I know my son's innocent. And that's it.
All right.
Then the judge imposes sentence.
The State versus Michael Paul Saltz, Jr. for the crime of murder. Is it you, Michael Paul Saltz, Jr., be committed to the State Department of Corrections for a period of 42 years. Good luck to you, sir.
Mikey Saltz is serving his sentence at Kershaw Correctional Institution. The state of South Carolina does not allow inmates to give interviews. In the meantime, two families cope with the loss of their sons.
You get up every morning and you do what you got to do, because you can't slow down, because if you still I still got my other children, I got my wife, and then I still got my son. I got to get him out there one day, and I know that. So you got to, and me laying around and licking my wounds or feeling sorry for myself is not going to help my son. So you try to make the best of any situation.
Mike Sr. sold the Mustang he and his son restored to pay for Mikey's defense. Since Mikey's conviction, he has quit restoring cars.
It's not the same anymore. You got to have something. You got to have your buddy there. And you only got one real good buddy, and I don't have mine right now. I will have him, I guess, but not right now. I don't. That's our prayer candle. We got on we lit it when this all happened. It's never went out. We keep it lit. That's for Mike. And I honestly believe with all my heart that Mike's coming home. It's just a matter of time. We just haven't pushed that right button yet. The buttons are out there, and I believe the right one, that eventually we're going to do it. We can't give up faith or hope.
For Jackie Barefoot, nothing can ease the pain of losing her son.
There was nothing to make it better. I was seeing psychiatrists, but they didn't really help much. They put me on different medicines, and they didn't really help too much. And I just decided I'd have to do it on my own, because the pills weren't going to make it any better. I drank some. Drinking didn't make it no better, made it worse. There's nothing to fix it, and there still isn't. But I just get by day and raise the two children I've got, because I'm all they've got.
In the summer of 1999, another young boy was abducted from his bicycle, sexually assaulted, and killed. His body was found just half a mile from where Joe Barefoot was discovered. Although police dismiss any similarities between the cases, Mikey Saltz's supporters say the parallels raise questions about his involvement in the Barefoot killing. For Crime Stories, I'm Catherine Cryer.
Stay with us for a double to start our brand new series Beyond Scared Straight, which takes a group of troubled teens into a high-security prison for a taste of life on the inside. How will these youngsters react to such a shock to the system? Find out right after the break.
A 12-year-old boy vanishes. His mother searches desperately for him.
I was a frantic mother. I didn't know what to do.
4 months later, a disturbing discovery leads police to this teenager.
Everybody that knows him just thinks the world of him.
He is not the choir boy that his attorney and his family paint him out to be. There's definitely two sides to Michael Saltz, and one was not very pretty.
This is Crime Stories. I'm Catherine Cryer. For a parent, what could be worse than a missing child? Whether you live in a big city or a small town, the fear is the same, that your child has been abducted by a stranger. But what if that danger was much closer to home? That's what happened to Joe Barefoot. On May 25, 1997, a hot Sunday night in Columbia, South Carolina, Joe Barefoot should have come home before the sun went down, but he didn't.
Sunday night, Jackie called me, "Have you seen Joe? Do you know where Joe might be?" And I said, "No, I haven't."
At first, his mother, Jackie Barefoot, thought her 12-year-old son was outside playing and just lost track of time.
About 6, 7 o'clock, I looked for him a little bit, but I wasn't worried. I didn't get worried until it got dark because he knew to be home at dark.
When Joe still didn't come home, Jackie knew that something was very wrong.
And she said, "Well, Shasta, he's missing and I can't find him."
And then I just totally freaked out. I looked for him for about an hour before I called the police.
The police took a report and told Jackie to call the next day if she still hadn't heard from Joe.
And I think that they disregarded our panic. You know, and we see this all the time. Well, we don't. And we did not get the personal attention to begin with that Joe should have got.
The next day, there was still no sign of Joe. Jackie called the police again.
I called them Monday night. They came out. Called them Tuesday. They came out. Wednesday, I finally got an investigator.
That investigator was Dale Jones, Jr.
We started trying to talk to anybody in the area, started talking to other teenagers and young people. We had information from one of the other people that he had told them that he was running away.
But Joe was not the kind of kid to run away from anything.
He wasn't scared of much of nothing. He was cocky. He was a little smart butt. But he was a good kid.
Joseph was the second of 3 children, in between his brother Michael and his sister Samantha.
He had these eyes, and he had these eyes the day he come home from the hospital. These gorgeous, gorgeous eyes. And just his eyelashes were an inch and a half long. Any woman wanted to have them. When he learned to talk, he started getting this little smart mouth. Everybody else would think, and I'd just be laughing at him because he was nice that way. He was funny. He had character. He had personality that didn't belong to a 3-year-old.
As he got older, that personality sometimes got him into trouble.
A couple of times in school, he got in a couple of little ruckuses. There was one time he got caught mooning the camera in the bathroom in the boys' room. Joseph loved to go to the racetrack, and they just had a blast. You know, they made money off of getting ice for people. You know, they just were boys, and they played football and ran around the place like they owned it. Fairground was his second favorite thing. Christmas and his birthday, you know, because he was always getting stuff for them.
Several months before Joe disappeared, Jackie and the kids moved in with her parents.
He had to be tough in that neighborhood. Short little thing. Joe was small.